Welcome to the Who's Left podcast, a show about Indiana politics, history, and culture from the unapologetic perspective of the Hoosier left. My name is Scott Aaron Rogers, and I'm recording from Bloomington. You know, in my day job, I use a lot of different tools, saws, drills, nail guns, mostly just sanders and paintbrushes lately. But here at the Who's Left podcast, I use a different set of tools. Often it is a microscope, closely examining issues at a granular level. And sometimes it's a satellite, for seeing the big picture from afar. This episode definitely falls into that second category. Joining me for the interview today is Leslie Nuss Bamesberger, Democratic candidate for state senate in Indiana's 5th District, which includes parts of Porter and Jasper counties, plus all of Pulaski and White counties in the northwestern part of the state. Now, this is not to suggest Nuss doesn't have a series of well-thought-out policy priorities, because she absolutely does, including women's health and safety, balancing power in Indianapolis, education and workforce development, strengthening organized labor, prioritizing mental health services, and protecting the environment. And we do dig into policy a little bit. But mostly, this is a broad philosophical conversation about trauma, healing, forgiveness, and accountability. It is a discussion about restorative justice versus vengeance and retribution. It is a look at what role government should play in caring for our most vulnerable by a couple of parents to medically complex children. An exploration of what it really means to build a culture of life. Before we turn to the interview, please consider supporting Who's Left with a paid subscription. I currently work as an independent craftsman during the day and work on this project whenever I can. There are so many more things I want to do here at Who's Left. More campaign finance research, more live hangouts, and a daily episode if we can get there. But I need your help. If you can, visit scottaaronrogers.substack.com and subscribe at the paid level. For $5 a month or $50 a year, you can help me push our state in a better direction, and maybe, if we reach critical mass, I can put down my tool belt and devote my full time to you, to this project, and to Indiana's future. So, if you have the means, pause right now, go to scottaaronrogers.substack.com and subscribe at the paid level. And while the best way to help this project is financially, if that doesn't work for your budget at this time, you can still help. Subscribe at the free level over on Substack. Set your favorite podcast player to auto-download new episodes of the show. Rate and review the show on whatever platform you use. This trains the algorithm to help new people find us. Follow me on social media on Facebook, Blue Sky, YouTube, and TikTok at Who's Left. On Instagram, Threads, and Twitter, I'm at ScottRog78. That's SCOTTROG78. And on Mastodon at ScottRog78 at Hoosier.social. Please subscribe on whichever platforms you use, and send me a DM to discuss ideas for the project. But most importantly, share our message. Forward the articles to friends, family, and colleagues. Don't just like, but share on social media. Invite others to our little corner of the Indiana left. And I might be the guy with the microphone, but I try to take this thing where your input leads me. So please, be generous with feedback. Good, bad, or indifferent. I value it all. To those who have joined this community already, especially those paid subscribers, thank you for believing in me and this project, and to everybody, thanks for listening. Now finally, a content warning. This conversation does contain a graphic description about a violent attack. If you need to skip that, it's at approximately 9 to 12 minutes from right now. Here's my interview with Leslie Nuss. Leslie Nuss Bamesberger, welcome to the Who's Left podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I,
Got Aaron Rodgers.
it's a pleasure. Why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners here today?
Well, like he said, my name is Leslie Nuss Bamesberger. I am running for Indiana State Senate in District 5, and that is in the sort of northwest-ish part of Indiana. It's part of Porter County, Valparaiso, Hebron, and Couts, half of Jasper County, the eastern half, all of Pulaski, and all of White County. And I'm really excited for November. It's been a long race, but it's been really amazing.
Okay, so you're up there in Northwest Indiana. I'm originally from Michigan City, so that's my old stomping grounds. Yeah, and maybe offer your input in a dispute. What exactly constitutes the region?
Well, Northwest Indiana really, I think, is sort of like, bringing kind of up close to Lake Michigan, right? So that it goes kind of to the Illinois border. And yeah, I would say Michigan City and Nailport, and then a little bit south. But then you kind of start getting into more rural areas like Munster would be that, Highland, Gary, Maryville, kind of the more densely populated, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
There. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, does Crown Point count?
I believe Crown Point counts.
Okay. As a Michigan City person, like, we're kind of out there on the fringe,
yes.
Between the region and Michiana. We're sort of in that Venn diagram there.
You're on the edge, but you're still in there. We gotcha.
So, I sort of know my way around up there, but you said, Valparaiso, Couts. What was the other community up there?
Hebron.
Porter County,
Hebron.
Yeah, okay. And then a lot of those rural counties. So, would you say your district is primarily rural with like a little bit of urban in it?
You know what? I think you're right. I think it is kind of primarily rural. It has changed, right, with gerrymandering, and White County was added after the 2020 census. But I mean, I love White County. I love Monticello and what I call river culture. But yeah, there are a lot of rural and kind of small towns. But, I mean, I think it's just wonderful to go out and meet all these people and see that there are concerned and educated people everywhere. There are also vulnerable people everywhere who really need strong government, even if they may not fully embrace that idea because of what they've been taught. But yeah, I love rural people. My dad grew up on a farm in South Dakota, and so that's in my roots. And we have some farmland actually in Valparaiso, 10 acres ourselves. But we don't actively farm. We have a farmer. So I can't say that I am a farmer. But yeah, I love small town.
I mean, you wouldn't be the first Indiana Politico to, like, put on some boots and say you're a farmer.
That's true. And then, yeah.
So tell us kind of a little bit about your life, how you got to be where you are today, and what drove you to get involved in politics.
Well, I grew up in sort of a politically aware family. My father was really a staunch Democrat. My mother was a Republican. She was from Hershey, Pennsylvania. And my father devoted his life to, in his way, what he thought, working on making the world a better place. He was a juvenile probation officer, and he really wanted to uplift marginalized communities. Towards the end of his life, he was very involved in feeding the homeless. So I always had that part, and he really wanted me to kind of do those kinds of things, but I, wanted to do my own thing. And I had a very, different things I studied in college. I considered going to medical school. I studied fashion. Then right after college, I got hired to start recycling programs for the University of Illinois, which kind of fulfilled that idea of making the world a better place. And I learned a lot about the environment in the process. And I became very concerned about the future and, water and just a clean, healthy environment. So that was always my background. And then there were some, things that happened, and I decided to pursue my dream of going to New York. So I did. I left that. I went to New York, where I lived for 10 years. And I worked as a designer, mostly freelance, and I also pursued a career as a singer-songwriter. I started my own record label, and I released several records there. And then I ended up moving. I know you're going to ask me about, what happened, but I moved to Chicago. And then I met my husband, and I moved to Valparaiso, and we had one child. And then we had another child who was born with multiple disabilities. And then I became more of an activist, I guess, and an advocate as I learned more about this community, and that there just wasn't much available for children with disabilities at the time, like classes or play groups. And so I worked with some other parents, and we formed something called Club Wonder, and we started a play group, and we had art time, and we had shows at the library. We did all kinds of things. And then I got involved in his school, working on making that a better place. So that was kind of a roundabout way. And I realized that because I could talk for people who didn't have the time or the energy or the ability, that maybe that was a good thing for me to do, that I could use my skills to make the world a better place. And it did lead me to run for office. I mean, directly, I did go to my opponent and I begged him not to vote to overturn abortion, because after my kids were born and little, I got pregnant again. I desperately wanted another child, but it was not viable. And I thought, well, I could just have, miscarriage. What's the big deal? Women have been having them forever. And no, not for me. I lost so much blood that I required an emergency D&C. And
Oh, well.
Right. And abortion was legal. There was no problem. I was able to get it. But I realized, one, things can turn deadly quickly. And that, two, if there was an abortion ban, that women may avoid seeking care, and that it could be harder to get. And I just did not like the idea of women losing their lives over this, and especially, and I told my opponent, leaving behind children. I said I would have left behind 2 children with no mother, one who has special needs. And, I just feel very strongly about that. And I just think that pregnancy is it's an intense time, and we have no business as a society and in a government as making that time any more fraught than it is. And that we need to be supporting women 100% and just working to make the best outcome. Because what we want, if we want healthy children and healthy families and a healthy society, is we want the best outcome for all. We don't want traumatized mothers or traumatized babies or traumatized husbands or traumatized families. So that's kind of, what fueled me. And I just thought we needed more people in office who have compassion and who can speak up and who will speak up and who are comfortable speaking up, because some people are afraid or reluctant, but that time has passed. That's come and gone. Now, things are too serious now. And so that's why I'm here.
Yeah. You said a really important word there, and it was compassion. Now, you said you lived in New York for some 10 years. You had a very traumatic event of your own that happened there. If you don't mind talking about it.
I don't mind talking about it. Yes. In 1999, I went to the movies with a friend of mine who was a former roommate. And during the movie, these kids were like, I don't know, I think they were shooting like bits of paper at us or spitting at us or something. And my friend turned around and told him to knock it off. And I got a little nervous because it's New York. And afterwards, they came up to us, and this young woman said something to my friend, and I said something to her. And then I thought she punched me. So I grabbed her because, I don't know, that was my first reaction, and I was in really good shape, and I could not believe that somebody would punch me over that. But it turns out that she had slashed my face. I just felt like a sting. And so I was so angry with her because they were just such jerks. And anyway, she was slashing my face. And I didn't know that until I heard her slash my head. And I thought, oh, that sounds like she's cutting open a box. Because I was always, like, as a singer-songwriter, like packaging CDs and sending them out and stuff. And I put my hand to my head and I looked at it, and it was covered in blood and hair. And I just I couldn't believe this, right? So in the meanwhile, she was able to, sort of get away from me. People saw her throw what I'm assuming is the weapon. It was just a crazy scene. People chased her down. She went the wrong way, so she cornered herself, and this nice man held on to her. This other man came over to me, poured water on my head, and helped me. And I got taken to the nearby hospital, where they let me just sit there for the longest time. I was covered in blood, and I went to the bathroom, to wash my hands because there was a bathroom right there. I don't know. I started shrieking because I thought she'd cut a piece of my nose off at the time, which she had made a T, and so it had spread open. But I just started screaming. So I called my friend. I said, we're leaving this hospital. Find a hospital that has a plastic surgeon, because that's the only thing I knew, that if you're messed up like that, you should have a plastic surgeon. And the nurses were like, oh, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. And I was like, I'm not going to be fine. So we left the hospital in a taxi and went to Beth Israel, where there was a plastic surgeon already called in. So he stitched me up and sent me home. And I mean, it was a big ordeal. I had to go, I had to pick her out in a lineup, which was really kind of just bizarre. And I'd barely seen her, and I had to sign like order of protection, I guess. But the police said this was a random crime. She's not going to come after you. And I just, had like 2 black eyes, and I was just covered in, all things. People came by and they were teasing me like, well, she really got you. And then I wasn't sure whether I should press charges, because the police said that was up to me. And I found out that she was 15. And I thought, wow.
Oh, man.
She's only 15, like, should I do this? I don't know. And it was right around Easter. And I'm not Catholic, but I went to see a Catholic priest in my neighborhood. He was this really old man, and we sat down and I told him what had happened. And I said, I just, I was thinking about, like, I should just forgive her for this and just move on, right? And he said, no, she should be punished, because if she had cut your artery or your jugular, you would have bled to death before anybody could gotten to you. And she doesn't respect human life. And I was like, okay. So then, first of all, I had to grapple with the fact that she could have killed me, because I was just going, like, she cut my eye like all the way to the eyelid. So first I was like, oh, she could have blinded me. Like, wow.
Wow.
So I had to go before a grand jury, which was really quite, that was an experience too. I was just like petrified of the whole thing. And, there were people like asking me what happened. And I was like, I don't know, maybe they're going to say, it's okay. It was just a fight. But I think they charged her with, I think it's like second-degree manslaughter or something. It's like attempted murder. And that was just kind of wild. The whole thing was wild. Then I had to get a lawyer. Well, I didn't have to, but people said you should have a lawyer to handle this. They said I could go to this, like a state-appointed therapist or something. I remember going way downtown, like by Wall Street. And I sat down and the guy goes, well, you might never get over this. And I thought, what? What is he saying? Like, I don't want to carry this for the rest of my life. So I didn't go to him anymore. I was like, okay, that's not what I want. I'd gotten on the subway right away because I was like, I don't want to be afraid to go out. Because I was really shook up for a long time. I mean, I just...
Understandably, yeah.
I couldn't believe this happened. And I mean, it was like, I'm a designer, and a singer-songwriter. And like, what would have happened if I'd lost my eye? So I was really grappling with all these things. And but then I was very active in finding out about her and what was going on. And the lawyer told me it was a gang initiation. And I was like, wow, man, that's like serious. And I found out that she was going to get 4 months in like a juvenile, I don't know, place, but she was it wasn't like a jail, but because she was, it was her first offense. And I was like, is that going to be enough? And the woman said, well, it's over Christmas and Valentine's Day. And I think it's going to do something. So, and then this woman who was like, I don't know, our case manager said, you could go and make a victim statement if you wanted to. And I said, all right, I think I want to do that. And she was Puerto Rican, and I knew she, spoke Spanish. And somebody had given me a book about butterflies, but it was in Spanish because I had written a song called Butterfly. And I thought, I didn't want to give her this book. And I had a friend named Elvis. He was in the music industry. And, we were talking about how butterflies can change and that she could change. And I was like, yeah. Yeah, because I thought, I don't want to be some stepping stone for her to do another crime, and to kill somebody, I wanted her to have a good life, get married, go to college, have kids. So a friend of mine flew in from Chicago to go with me, which was really nice. And I just had like a few things written on a piece of paper. And I decided, it was my turn. I got to go up. It's kind of a crowded, like, I don't know what kind of court it was, but there were a lot of people there. So maybe it was just one case after case, and she had to go for continuation or something. And I remember her attorney, he was, cool looking dude with these long dreadlocks. And my friend was sitting down, and she said, when I spoke, like the whole place was silent. And she had said that she cut me with a ring. And so I think that's why the charge wasn't more serious and they couldn't find the weapon. So I told her that I knew that she'd cut me with a knife and that, she wasn't telling the truth. And I said that she owed me an apology. And I told her that she could have blinded me. And I told her that I worked as a designer and I wasn't sure how I would have been able to make a living if I, couldn't see out of one eye. And then I told her that I wanted to give her this present, this book. And I said, I don't want you to ever hurt anybody again in your life. And I told her, I want you to have a good life. And I told her I wanted you to get married and go to college or, whatever, and have children. And apparently, like, some of her family members were sitting by my friend, and my friend Lily was really watching them and paying attention, to how they were responding. And I guess it's probably very unusual for somebody to do that. I didn't really, I wasn't mad at her by then because I was more focused on healing. And I didn't even know that that's called restorative justice. Somebody had mentioned it to me, and I just only recently I was like, I guess so. I just was trying to do what was the best for my heart because I didn't want to carry that around with me for the rest of my life. I wanted to do what I could do. And I know we're going to talk about this whole idea of retribution. It's a pernicious problem in our society right now. And the interesting thing is that, right after I was done, my friend got up and we just exited the courtroom immediately. And the judge everybody was just stunned. The judge was looking at me like they were all like, what? And as we were leaving, her boyfriend or whatever was walking in. He didn't recognize me. And he just looked like a kid, like a happy guy, right? And that stayed with me too. Like when we were in the theater in the moment, he was angry and it seems quite scary, right? And he was also just a kid. And so I don't know. I just like I don't think I'm a hero or anything for doing what I did. I just did what felt right to me and based on what I thought was the right thing to do. And so has that guided me, or would that guide me as a state senator? I believe it would, right? Because I would like to say, right, that what I've noticed sometimes, most of the people whose doors I knock on, they're awesome. I love meeting people. I'm giving lots of hugs. I talk to people. I mean, people tell me all kinds of things about themselves and sometimes really personal stuff. So I'm like, I'd like to give you a hug. And we do that. But there are some people who are quite angry. And I've noticed that there is this punishing culture. Like, I have a stick and I want to hit you with it. And I have a stick and I want to hit you with it. Or I want to use my mouth as a weapon and I'm going to say these really mean things. And we really need to get to a point where we're just stop doing that, right? Put the weapons down and let's just talk to each other, right? So I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at.
Wow, that is an intense story. But you must be an incredibly big person to forgive someone for, a life-threatening attack.
Yeah. I realize I am alive. It could have been worse, right? I mean, I grew up with those kinds of thoughts too all the time, right?
Yeah.
And that, well, I suppose if she hadn't been caught and processed and gone through that, maybe I would have been angry, right? But I did what the priest told me to do. I let her go through the system. I didn't want her to be like locked up forever.
Right.
That wouldn't have made me happy either. But, hopefully in the 4 months that helped her. But, right, because there's a lot of times where people have horrible things done to them. The person's never caught, or they go to the police and the police don't do anything, or, there's lots of rape kits that aren't being processed, right? That might leave one with a different kind of feeling. But I think maybe we had the right experience. She did have to have some consequences. It didn't ruin her life, the consequences, but she did have to take responsibility for it.
Yeah.
And maybe that's part of what's going on, what's wrong with our culture right now, too. Too many people who are rich and have really good lawyers get out of suffering or experiencing any consequences. And that leaves us with a sense of injustice. I felt like justice was done because people that were in the system told me that this was appropriate justice for her. So I did have trust in the system. I said, okay, 4 months. All right, she's 15. And she turned 16, right, by the time she went in there, right? So, and it wasn't up to me. I didn't have to say, well, how long or whatever. I trusted them. And then I did my part by saying, I'm whole here, right? You can see that I can see, and my nose got, I have little scars. You can't really see them. And, and that was the best outcome. So, yeah. But there was some kind of justice, and there were some kind of consequences.
It's,
so I can understand why a lot of
really,
people.
yeah.
Oh,
Oh, sorry. Yeah, you
I was going to say, I can understand why people are angry. There's people at the top right now who have no consequences for all the horrible things that they've done. And they really should experience some consequences, because that is part of the healing process. Then I think we could heal as a nation, more or less, if people had consequences.
Well, yeah, you're talking about like healing as a nation and healing from a traumatic event, and our nation's history is full of repeated traumatic events. And like with this restorative justice model, at a societal level, like we sort of need to have that conversation with ourselves and heal from the bad aspects of our history, and admit where we've gone wrong, and deal with the consequences of that, and then most importantly, work to make it right.
Absolutely. My husband and I just went to Washington, D.C., and, the two places I wanted to go were the African American Museum, which was incredible. And it's not called the Native American. I believe it's called the Museum of the American Indian, which I was a little surprised about. But those are two really serious, heavy things that our culture, our nation is founded on. And we're still moving, to heal those wounds. We can do it. We can do it. We're Americans. And, there's so many people who want to heal. And, we just need to keep going and not let, not let the angry people who are stuck in the grief cycle derail that,
Yeah. It would have been very easy, I imagine, and understandable if you had wanted vengeance, right? Retribution. That.
Yeah. I mean, for like
natural.
a week I did. I wanted a rematch because I was so mad, like I was just thinking, wow, over next to nothing, all this trauma happened. But then I put it aside, obviously, right? I mean, I was able to just experience that and then let it go. Experience that idea. And then I moved over that idea, right, to this, like, letting the system take its place and then work on myself, right? And I gave that up. I mean, I realized I did ask for an apology. I know she didn't say anything, but honestly, I think she was a little bit stunned. She kind of looked down. Like I think she did feel something, and that's okay. Maybe I hope that there has been some point since then where she has silently said, "I'm really sorry," and that's all. She doesn't have to tell me.
This is like 25 years ago. Do you know what happened with her?
No, I know what her name is because I had to sign that order of protection or whatever. She has a fairly common name. I didn't want to be weird about it, but I mean, if I would hope that she's doing all right. I mean, I would be open to talking to her, of course, but I don't know. Yeah, I didn't know if it would be weird,
The what if it's weird kind of stops us, I think, from doing a lot of things. It's that battle inside your own head, right? And the forgiveness versus retribution, and the the healing, and all of it. It goes on inside of each of us.
Yeah, maybe you'll inspire me to look her up.
Yeah, well, I hate to like dive back into politics
Right.
after all that, but in a way that restorative justice versus retribution, I kind of feel like encapsulates the left versus right dynamic
Yes. Right.
in a way.
Fiery, angry God versus the loving, merciful God, right? For some people. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. And that prevents that retribution and then being stuck in that angry place. I feel like it prevents the Republican supermajority in Indianapolis from like governing with care in mind.
Yeah, right. They always want to punish somebody, but punish somebody so that they don't get punished, right? If they're doing the punishing, they're not going to get punished. Instead of, let's not punish and let's work out, the best situations, the best solutions that we can come up with to keep people safe, to keep people healthy, to, keep our communities vibrant, because there's so many beautiful towns here, in my district that I go out to, and I'm like, wow, they still have a little movie theater here, or look at that cool old building. There's so much beauty everywhere, and people just want to be happy. I mean, that's what I hope. Some people, are stuck in anger. I don't think they understand that if they can get through this cycle of grief, at the end of that is joy. That's what's at the end of the rainbow, the grief rainbow. That's the bucket of gold, is joy. And I've realized that, Fox News is extracting all this joy from people. These people are watching it day and night, right? It is paying, these people are paying a terrible price for watching that network. They are losing their joy and their humanity.
And a lot are losing family members, yeah.
Right. And their humanity, because they just, it is designed to keep them angry, and they're angry. And and I go to their door, there's a couple people, right? And I just go and listen. And I say, well, okay, let me write that down. I'm not really sure if I've heard that. And I don't think they can process the fact that I'm not getting angry back. And so sometimes they don't know what to do except basically say goodbye. And that's a shame,
Yeah. It's, we talked about the dichotomy between like restorative justice and retribution, and Republicans governing on retribution and like not being able to. There's like two fundamentally different views of what government is, what its function should be, right? We can either think of it as all of us pooling resources, working together to care for one another, or it's there to keep people in line.
Right. Maybe in North Korea it is, right? That's what North Korea is all about. Keeping people in line. I guess I would be with the former, right? It's supposed to be, you've made this tremendous amount of money because you happen to be an American, and our laws and our society has allowed you to be so successful, and you give back because of that, not hoarding it all for yourself, money you could never spend in 400 lifetimes. And that is something that I struggle with sometimes to understand. The hoarding and the greed. I think that's a challenge.
It's like the one ring, right? If you spend time with it, it sort of poisons your soul, So, these people may have been good, decent, caring folks at some point, but proximity to money and power can turn you into a little golem.
Yeah, it can be corrupting. It doesn't have to be if you surround yourself with the right people, and you check yourself all the time instead of believing, don't believe the hype, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Some people, yeah, but that's what we need, more role models. I mean, there are examples of people who are great philanthropists, but however, sometimes, our tax system right now is maybe out of whack, and the more money you get, and you get just some evil geniuses in there, then they just keep corrupting the system, and I just think it makes it very challenging. Right?
And the best form of philanthropy is to just like pay your damn taxes and let the democratic process handle it.
That's right. Because some people want to think that they're better. They can create something better. But I could just say, like, as the mother of a child with special needs, public school is the best place for him. They have the most, systems in place. They are the best, well-equipped. Now, they could have more money and do more and be better. And that's also a funding issue. But the idea that private school, charter schools, maybe in 50 years, but I don't see anything wrong with fully funding our public schools and working in that system, strengthening them so that they serve all. And especially in the more rural towns, they rely on the public schools. And that is what we need, strong schools to keep attracting people to these smaller areas. We want to attract new families or people who want to start families. They got to have a place to send their kids to school. So.
So you talk about your son, and he's born with many complications, right? My son, before he passed away, was one of these kids too.
And, I didn't know that. Thanks for telling me about that. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
What was his name?
Lane.
Lane. Could Lane talk?
Yeah. He yeah.
Okay. So that was
he talked kind of funny, like, a lot of people maybe not understand him, but if you spend enough time around him, like, his family, obviously, we all know what he was saying, and he could tell you a lot with his eyes, and not say anything to. Oh, I'd give anything to like have him give me a stink eye right now, but,
right. Yeah.
I'm gonna fall apart here.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Wow. Oh, my heart. Well, when I see you, I'll give you a hug. We'll hug. I'm sorry.
But yeah. So, but we know that boat, and
yeah. And we love these people, and they are people, and they are individuals, and they are deserving of compassion and care. And the caregivers are deserving of compassion and respite. And there are many, many people with disabilities in Indiana and in my district. And I talk to their parents and their grandparents and their sisters and their brothers. And I think that the foundation of a healthy and a good and a worthy society is one that takes care of their vulnerable. So that is really the foundation from where I come from. And your son has dignity, and everybody deserves to have compassion, because some people it's a fluke. And, your son didn't ask to be born that way, and neither did my son. And so as our society, as we progress, we need to keep working on growing in this area, and that's why I did go out to different groups and say, could you have a class for kids with disabilities? Just how about once a week or once a month? We'll come, and because we want to see our children do as many of the things that other children do as possible. And I think that because we want to experience ourselves as parents too, right? So yeah, so that's just a big part of where I come from, and using my experience to be the voice of other parents and families. Yeah, because I know how it is, and I want to be the strong one who works to find solutions.
That's the culture of life, that Republicans talk about. They talk about building a culture of life, and they're talking about fetuses and
fetuses, right?
Talking about like real living, breathing
beings,
care, and caring for people as the most vulnerable, right? That is the culture of life, if you ask me.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. And that is, I just think that it is, it's important to keep talking about, because if we're talking about healing and moving over this retribution and anger, I have advised people, go spend some time with people with severe disabilities. It will open your eyes. There are a lot of, cynical people, and I think that would do them a world of good. Get off their own heads, and sometimes these little problems that aren't really problems, and go and be fully with other people. So I mean, it is a goal, and we don't always get there, and we don't always have the perfect interactions. We're all human, but and that's where we need to go. And that's where we can be. Wouldn't it be awesome? I get elected, and then I start working on this, and Indiana becomes one of the best states to live if you have disabilities. Like, wouldn't that be a great goal? Because one of the reasons why I'm running is I'm tired of Indiana being at the bottom of, some lists, and at the top of the other lists that I would rather we're not. I'd rather get known for good things and great education and great care for people with disabilities, and great water and air quality, and we can do this. It's not hard. It just takes people working together.
Yeah. Well, they've put a lot of hurdles in front of us, certainly.
Yeah, they can come down.
One of the big things you were talking about, building a culture of life and taking care of our most vulnerable, and so yes, like that takes money and resources, right? One of the big problems in Indianapolis currently is FSSA. That's the Family and Social Services Administration, right? They just misplaced $1 billion.
Well, if you read the new article, apparently there was $700 million in fraud that a federal whistleblower was able to tell people about. And that led to this $1 billion shortfall. But people had the chance to investigate and prosecute that. And the powers that be decided not to do that, which essentially amounts to a handout of $700 million to certain hospitals and insurance companies. And we should be outraged about this, because as a result, right, then to make up for this $1 billion shortfall, the supermajority GOP cut out this program called Attendant Care, which paid families who had to quit their jobs and stay home with their loved ones who are so medically fragile, because you and I know it's hard to find good care for your loved one with multiple disabilities, and sometimes you need extra care that you just can't get. And I always say, you cannot necessarily rely on your family because you need people who are willing and able. They have to be both.
Mhm.
You can't just
Yeah, you need special training. Yeah.
You need special training, right? What happens if your child has a seizure? Definitely. So they took away this program, which helped keep families out of poverty. And they moved them all to a different program, which will pay them significantly less money. So we don't know what the fallout of that is going to be and what is going to happen to those families. But yeah, that probably could have been avoided if they had just had the courage to go after fraud and say, you cheated us, we want that money back. Instead of just kind of sweeping it under the rug saying, oh no, you keep your $700 million, we'll fix it somewhere else. I mean, who does that? That's crazy, right? I mean,
and the most vulnerable people. It's not like,
right. Why do they always have to suffer, right? Suffer the children. No. Suffer the fat cats. And they're not even going to suffer because they've already got more than they need, right? Let's just, follow the rules, pay your fair share, don't cheat, right?
yeah. So we've been keeping this thing like really high level, and it's awesome. I appreciate where we're having like big philosophical discussion here. But talk about what the people that you're speaking with as you go around the district. What are they thinking about?
Honestly, a lot of people, and this you may be surprised, do not want trans people to get picked on. Right? That's another vulnerable population. I've had people tell me they just want that to stop. It's bullying. Bullying culture is pernicious. And we need to stop bullying people who are vulnerable and fragile and need our support. So that's actually one. People actually do really care about, LGBTQ people, and they don't want, I mean, in general, right? So that trans people fall into that category. So I made buttons that said free Democrat hugs, and the background was just sort of the rainbow colors, right? Because, and they're incredibly popular. I mean, there's a lot of allies who take them because I love to give hugs, and I had a free mom hugs button, and then I thought, oh, it should be free Democrat hugs, right? Just as like a little joke. But I think that's actually really, really important. And it just depends on which doors you knock on. People do care about teacher pay and teachers in schools. Let's stop picking on public schools, right? They've done a world of good. I was educated in the public schools, and I got a great education. And we need to value knowledge that is going to help us in this coming century. We're not going to get there without knowledge. We need knowledge to solve problems. And we need educated people to make, the best decisions. I'd say those are kind of the bigger things. There are other people who just have sort of small things. I mean, some people have maybe bureaucracy problems with the government and Social Security, or somebody might have an issue with family court. And it does sound like there are just a lot of little things that could be fixed or solved that would make people's lives a little bit better. I mean, I do hear the occasional, thing about immigrants, and I'll say, well, I'm running for state office. I have absolutely nothing to do with that, because you can't get into a real conversation with people like that, especially if they are watching Fox News. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
They don't care about what the facts are. Yeah.
And the worst thing about, well, there's lots of bad things about it, but the ironic thing I think about the immigrant hate, if you look at like Springfield, Ohio, where all that stuff's been going on, it was a success story. Like, their economy's been doing well. The Republican leadership around there wanted these people. They've been a positive contribution to the area, and it's reviving a town that had been decimated. We've got countless.
We have a lot of little towns. Yeah, we have a lot of little towns, and there are some little towns in District 5, and the immigrants who've moved in there have opened businesses, multiple businesses, and they've fixed up old homes, so prevented them from falling apart or falling down, and revitalizing small towns. And we are a nation of immigrants. I mean,
know how to use spices. Yeah.
Spice, right? And music, right? I mean, culture. Come on. I don't know. I think, right. People need to take a deep breath and realize we are a wonderful nation. We do have issues that we can work on, but there's so much beauty and joy here, and happiness, and neighbors. You've got lovely neighbors and people. One thing I realized, I mean, you're asking me, I think there is a lot of people, like a loneliness epidemic. And so I love knocking on these doors just to talk to somebody they've never met before for a few minutes. We exchange a little bit about ourselves. We enliven each other's day. And, get out and get to know your neighbors. Plan a block party. I think that, there's just a lot of goodness that we need to tap into here, and we will overcome.
Yeah. So when you win this thing here in November, and you take your seat in the state Senate next January. Now, I mean, you run the numbers. Democrats cannot flip the Senate.
Right.
Okay,
no.
So you are going to be in the minority.
Yeah.
What do you envision as your role there?
To learn what we can do in the minority, and I will be speaking up because that's just who I am. And I will be, pushing back on the things that they say. And I will be working to get more Democrats elected. I will find those other districts that have been, unopposed, and work on recruiting people to run. It is challenging to run besides raising the money. And, this is a 9-month job, and some people spend even longer. And you don't really get a great manual. I'm not saying people are not doing a good job, but it is just a challenge. So if we can support other people to run, that's what I'm going to do. But I will learn from the other Democratic senators, because they are able to have bills passed and insert language that makes things better. But I will be joining their team, and, I'll be playing on their team and seeing, we're all going to huddle together and figure out what we can do. Because sure, they can take votes and we don't even need to be in the room, but is that really how it should be? And we need to get them to see that's really not right. And that's not what they want. They want our input. We have good input. And that's what I'm going to get them to see, that we have good input.
And, more Democrats, more good input. And if they don't want it, it's going to be a lot harder to ignore if there's more of you.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, at first they are going to ignore us, and they're going to be angry. I mean, they've been ignoring them, but we're going to, they haven't backed down, and I'm not going to back down, and we're just going to keep going. I mean, we're going to keep talking about the good things that we can have, instead of things like banning books that just make life miserable. I mean, I can just say at my son's school, they don't have, or the school he was going to, which is exclusively for kids with special needs, they didn't have a full-time librarian. So when they passed that law that all the books had to be scanned in and blah, 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 they just had to shut down the library for several years until they could make that happen. And, I was a part of the PTO, and we helped work on getting that happen. It's still not reopened. It's just, it causes chaos, and we got to stop with the chaos. We don't need chaos. We need calm, measured things, to move our culture forward. Because that's where we need to go.
Wow.
Turn the page and we're not going back.
Yeah, we are not going back. So with what little time we have here, I guess I will turn over the forum to you to tell people how they can help your campaign, where they can go to donate and volunteer, and just whatever else you need, whatever we missed.
Well, I have a robust postcard writing program. We are trying to get at least up to age 29. And if we can get there, we are going to keep going because younger people typically do not vote at the same level that older people do. We provide you with a postcard. It's stamped. You have the addresses, a simple message. If you would like to write postcards, we can get them to you in packs of 25. You can sign up for that on my website, which is nussforus.com. Easy to remember. N-U.
Great website name.
F-O-R, thanks, US.com. You can also make donations through there. What do we do with your donations? Buy postcards and stamps. If we can make enough money, get enough money, we'll take out some ads in some of the smaller communities that still have newspapers and some radio ads. We do have yard signs. You can sign up for a yard sign if you live in District 5. I'm very frugal, so I try to be really good with the money. I know I appreciate every dollar that people give. Some people give $5, some people give $1,000, and I appreciate all of it. So those are the things. We're going to be doing phone banking. You can sign up to do that as well. And canvas. Some people have been reluctant to canvas, but I would say we provide you with addresses that, we think are going to be more favorable to our message. We don't want to send you to people, sometimes, and you can just say, it's okay, thank you, I'm going to move on. I go with people canvassing all the time, but if you forgot somebody you can go canvassing with, even better. Or you can just, if you live in District 5, say you will canvass 10 or 20 of your neighbors, people in your, couple block radius. I can send you a palm card and tell you exactly what I'd like you to do. Just knock on their door, and if they're not there, you can just leave it at their door, a note from you saying, I'm your neighbor. I want to tell you about somebody that I've, think you should vote for, something like that. But if you want to help, let me know. We'll put you to work. I love it.
Fantastic. All right. Leslie Nuss, thank you so much for joining the HoosLeft podcast here tonight.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. It's such a good conversation that I would like to continue even after we're done.
Absolutely. Once again, that was Leslie Nuss Bamesberger, Democratic candidate for State Senate District 5, which includes White and Pulaski counties, as well as parts of Jasper and Porter counties in northwest Indiana. Quick aside on that area of the state, as somebody who grew up in Michigan City and lived in Highland for a couple years, I am of the place and allowed to have an opinion, perhaps an unpopular one, on what exactly constitutes the region. Whereas a region maximalist might count the entire 219 area code, I am a region minimalist. Only Lake County, north of US 30, counts in my book. Hammond, Whiting, Dyer, Munster, Highland, Cherville, East Chicago, Griffith, Gary, Maryville, Hobart, Lake Station, a sea of asphalt and concrete where one town bleeds into the next. I expect a spirited argument in the comments section. And go. But seriously, let's turn to the substance of my discussion with Leslie. She has known unspeakable trauma and faced a choice between retribution and reparation. In a way, this mirrors the fundamental difference between the political right and left regarding the role of government, what it can be, and what it should be. Are the mutual aid functions of the state to be thrown off, leaving only an authoritarian force meant to impose order? Or is it a collective activity, all of us, through our fairly elected representatives, doing big things together that we couldn't do alone? Indiana Republicans speak often about building a culture of life. But what does that look like? Because in their decade plus of supermajority rule, I just don't see it. The air Hoosiers breathe and the water we drink are among the dirtiest in the country. Wouldn't a culture of life protect these basic necessities? GOP legislators have been making it increasingly easier to acquire and carry guns, now the leading cause of death among children and teens in Indiana. How is this building a culture of life? Attorney General Todd Rokita and Governor Eric Holcomb are chomping at the bit to restart state-sanctioned executions after a 15-year pause. This is literally the opposite of a culture of life. Indiana's extreme abortion ban would let women, mothers, bleed out in parking lots for want of necessary care. How is that building a culture of life? Is this culture, as Lincoln said, dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal? Or does Wilhite's law, that conservatism consists of exactly one proposition, there must be in-groups whom the law protects but does not bind, alongside out-groups whom the law binds but does not protect, hold true? What is the nature of justice in such a system? Is it retributive, based on anger, vengeance, and punishment? Or is it restorative, based on mercy, forgiveness, and healing? Because a grave injustice is being perpetrated against some of Indiana's most vulnerable. In December 2023, leaders revealed that a forecasting error had caused a $1 billion shortfall in the state's Medicaid program. In order to make up some of the difference, the Family and Social Services Administration proposed $300 million in cuts, much of which will be borne by the parents of medically complex disabled children. Kids like my late son and Leslie's son, who sounds like an awesome kid, and we didn't get to talk about him enough. But I'd like to meet him and his mom and cash in on that hug. It's been a difficult year, and I need all the hugs I can get. But worse still, that shortfall wasn't just some forecasting error. This from Indiana Public Broadcasting just a couple weeks ago. Quote, "Two former state officials filed a whistleblower lawsuit that alleged several Indiana hospital systems and managed care entities committed tens, likely hundreds, of millions of dollars of Medicaid fraud. The former officials filed the lawsuit in early 2021 when they obtained access to analysis from Indiana's fraud and abuse detection system contractor, IBM Watson Health. The case was sealed until earlier this year. The lawsuit alleges 4 companies in charge of managing Indiana Medicaid knowingly and improperly misused millions in Medicaid funds to pay claims that violate billing requirements. It also said 6 hospital systems obtained millions in funds by submitting thousands of false claims to Medicaid. Later in the article, starting in late 2017, the lawsuit said a senior executive at Indiana Medicaid improperly directed the program integrity team to significantly curtail its efforts to utilize IBM Watson's analysis and findings to recoup improper Medicaid overpayments by the defendants. The lawsuit pointed to political pressure from lobbyists for the health insurers and the hospitals. It also said this misconduct contributed to last year's $1 billion budget shortfall. The managed care entity defendants include Anthem, MedWise, CareSource, and Coordinated Care, which operates as Managed Health Services, or MHS. The hospital defendants include IU Health, Ascension, Community Health, Lutheran Health, Parkview Health, and Eskenazi, which is the public hospital division of the Health and Hospital Corporation of Marion County. End quote. Now, Leslie and I probably had enough interaction with one or more of these insurance companies or hospital systems to cover all of us. But I'll bet most Hoosiers have had to interact with one of them at some point. And I'll tell you what, as forgiving and understanding as she was in the wake of a violent attack, I want retribution against the crooks that would, in essence, defraud the most vulnerable among us to line their own pockets. After all, in one case, we're talking about a kid pressured by her peers in a gang initiation, and then in the other, we're talking about grown-ass adults who know damn well what they're doing. They crunched the numbers, ran it by the boss, and decided corruption was more profitable than doing right by disabled children. I'm ready to string them up on Monument Circle like Christmas lights. The rich, like the executives at those healthcare monopolies, never face consequences when they hurt people. Through campaign cash and lobbying, they control the leverments of a government, of justice, that create a culture not of life, but of exploitation. But in the end, Leslie is right. Punishment alone does not fix the problem. We need restorative justice at a societal level, truth and reconciliation. These problems are systemic. These alleged fraudsters played within the exceptionally loose rules written to facilitate the maximization of profit. Wealth and power easily corrupts individuals. We must address the root causes of the rot in our society: capitalism, patriarchy, and white supremacy, if we want to build a real culture of life. Thank you for listening. Thanks again to Leslie Nuss. Find out more about her at nussforus.com. Still is just a great website name. Volunteer, donate, help however you can. Links are in the show notes. Register to vote if you have not, and double-check your voter registration even if you have. The deadline in Indiana is October 7th. Tell everyone you know. If you're feeling extra generous after you've contributed to Leslie's campaign, head on over to scottaaronrogers.substack.com and help support this project with a paid subscription. That's where you'll find everything I publish, but you can also find me on Facebook, Blue Sky, YouTube, and TikTok at HoosLeft, and on most other social media sites at ScottRaj78. My DMs are open for feedback, tips, ideas, and concerns. You can also email me at scottraj78@gmail.com. Forward the show to a friend and have them forward it to another friend. Let's keep building this project and a more democratic Indiana. Until next time, this has been the Who's Left podcast. I'm Scott Aaron Rogers. Love each other, Indiana.